Fortune cookie.
Hey. Wow. Be true to yourself. It's very fitting.
Straight to the point. Right, remember, you're going to use that at the end, so take your time, think about it as we're going through the chat, and right at the end, then I'll ask you again.
Okay.
Just a message. It might be a festive season message.
Yeah.
You think about it. Right, let me start by saying, in my mind, when I was thinking about a theme for our conversation, I thought Burgundy, and at the same time, I thought Burgundy, perhaps even France, as a benchmark.
Okay.
So, throughout the conversation, let's try and relate to that now and again. Personally excited because I've been waiting for a long time to taste these wines. But it just didn't make sense to me that Hermanus, Saron. So it's going to be an interesting story.
Again, Brian, thank you so much for having me here today. And actually, I do get that question quite often, you know. Hermanus, Appelgem, Ade Valley, Saron. Does the grapes come from Saron? So my wine is called Lelie Van Saron, which is Afrikaans phrase. It is in my mother tongue, which is Afrikaans, and it actually refers to lily of the valley. So lily of Saron. So I'm basically referring to myself as being the flower lily of the valley Saron, where I grew up. And my brand just talks about, you know, where I come from, my background, which is quite important to me. And then I've always had this love and passion for cool climate, and cool climate grapes specifically, and especially when you make something as Chardonnay, where else to go and find your grapes than Hermanus by the ocean? As a reference, Burgundy, I like to say that I don't necessarily want to reference to that side of the world. No. Only because I want to show my own identity in my wine. I want to showcase Chardonnay made by Natasha Williams from Hemel and Ade Valley. But of course, you know, as a winemaker, you can't say that you don't enjoy Chardonnays from Burgundy. So of course, that was definitely a big impact in how I made the wine and how the wine has developed over time as well.
When did this wine bug bite?
The wine bug was never really meant to bite, if I can put it that way. So never thought about becoming a winemaker. It was never on my list. And funny enough, in grade 11, the school took us to have to go through this process of you know, writing tests, a career counselor.
Right.
And I remember sitting and writing this 3-hour exam, and at the back of the paper, the lecturer said, or the counselor said, well, write down, you know, the 5 things that you think you want to do one day. And obviously at that stage didn't have clear direction. So I was putting down, I want to be an accountant, I want to be a scientist, I want to be a lawyer. So all the big things I put there. But I've always had this love for nature and for science. So science has always been a big thing for me in school. And I grew up in a rural town. You know, I still herd cattle with my dad today when I go home. So the two for me had to work as well. So 2 weeks later, when we got our results from this career counselor, you know, he started this conversation and he said, well, do you know that Stellenbosch has vineyards? And I was like, no. But I wasn't sure where this conversation was going, you know. And he said, well, I'm telling you this because I actually think that you will be a good winemaker one day. And I was so upset. I didn't know where this came from because remember, I didn't grow up in a house where alcohol was consumed or anything like that. It was basically taboo in our house. So it just didn't make sense to me, like, what does the winemaker do? How does this fit into my picture and my future? Anyway, walked out, and stubborn as I am, decided not to tick winemaking on my application to Stellenbosch. And I went and I studied molecular biology at Stellenbosch University. And 6 months in, I started asking myself the question, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing what I need to do? And there was actually one lady that studied winemaking that stayed in the same hostel as I did. And I started asking her questions. And after a couple of months, I was telling myself, this is actually not far off from where I want to be and see myself. It's very unknown, but hello, molecular biology was also very unknown to me, so can't be that scary. And in my second year, I decided, let's make the change. Let's convert to winemaking. And that's kind of where it started. And so that was a 4-year course. But I have to say, when the winemaking bug actually bit, it was when I stepped into the cellar for the first time. And that was 4 years into studies, when we had our practical.
Right.
And for the first time, I can get my hands dirty, I was working the pumps, picking up the lines. I was just, all of a sudden, having grapes and going through that process and having the final product and seeing how it brought people together and just that consumable, something to enjoy. It was lovely. That's when the winemaking bug bit.
Right, so my last question before we taste. And let's talk about just the Syrah and the Chardonnay.
Okay.
What's your philosophy in making those two wines?
What's my
philosophy in making? Yeah. So in the winemaking process, we know that there's sounds like a cliche that wine starts, that's what everybody says, starts at the vineyard. So it's almost 90% coming into the cellar.
Yeah.
And from that point on, you just steer it into the right direction.
Yeah.
So you're steering.
Yeah.
What is your steering?
Exactly. Now, my philosophy when it comes to winemaking is I follow this simple approach where I believe that as a winemaker, we are a facilitator of this ancient art form, It's something that has been happening for decades and centuries. And we got taught how to make wine in a varsity setup. And then once you get into a cellar setup, you see and learn new things. I've had the opportunity to travel also, and then you also experience new ways of doing things. So it has definitely developed over time, and as I grew as a winemaker. But being a facilitator for me means that I don't want to influence too much. So I actually want to showcase the grape. I want to showcase where the grape is coming from, the climate, the soil, the weather, and the grapes, and just have a pure expression of that. And over time, it's changed into, being fond of a overly wooded Chardonnay because the wood is pronounced and it's beautiful, it's buttery. But then, traveling to France and to Jura and tasting a more subtle approach to something such as a Chardonnay and enjoying the fact that it's actually so versatile and there's such an elegance that you can show with the wine once you take that wood away. So again, going back to the element, which is the grape. So all my wines are made, the Chardonnay as well, naturally fermented. So again, you're talking about bringing that vineyard element in. I try to source as much as possibly from sustainable vineyards as well, where regenerative farming is practiced. Again, you need to take care of the land as well. Once it gets into the cellar, I start using older barrels, and with my Chardonnay, I incorporate concrete egg as well. Again, just showcasing purity of fruit and talking about the grapes and where it comes from. The Syrah for me has been an absolute journey. Because I work with grapes from Himalayan Arder Valley, I get the question a lot, why am I not making Pinot Noir? And I want to showcase with my range of wines, I want to showcase stuff that is, popping out for me. When I walk into a vineyard, it has to catch my eye and draw me in. And I like to make parcels that excite me. We have to play around in the cellar.
Right.
So
we don't know.
So you have to play around a bit and find interesting things. And the Syrah for me was one of those things. I've had the opportunity to work with grapes that come from warm climates such as Paarl and Wellington, you know, where we have heat waves in the summer. We can go easily into the 40s. And so I've seen the difference between the growing season here and in Hermanus, and actually what a beautiful outcome you get when you work with a red varietal that is planted in a cool climate, and the benefit of it being in that environment. So I ended up studying the Syrah vineyard for a year, just to look at the things, you know, how does the grape develop, and berry size and bunch size, because I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to execute in the wine. So my approach with the Syrah was exactly that, is that I wanted again to showcase the fruit but also the place, and I wanted to give something with elegance but concentration and depth, and just leave an impact when you have the wine. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I'll hold it for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
My absolute pleasure. Oh my goodness. Right. Am I supposed to say something? Fantastic notes. Somehow for me, I still feel that battery. Yeah. Like it or not, I can still pick it up. And my citrus is, right, when I asked you a question around food pairing, it will be about home-cooked meals. Most preferably, if possible, African cuisine, something you've always.
Yeah.
What do you pair that with?
Yeah, Brian, so my Chardonnay, I agree with everything that you just said. You know, I also find that lemon rind, you know, it's almost, I sometimes talk about the pithiness, is that white inside with the peel the lemon, and that minerality as well, I usually associate with using the concrete egg. Again, it's a vessel that doesn't impart any flavor to the wine. And then I actually like a bit of mouthfeel. So I like that subtle butteriness that you get on the palate. So on the nose, I feel like, you know, it's a fresh and vibrant wine, but the palate actually allows you to pair this very well with food. So it's something you can enjoy easy on itself, nicely chilled. But when you have this on the dinner table, for me, I find we tend to like, as Cape Malay, we tend to like quite a bit of spicy food.
Right.
Yeah, and so we make a lot of seafood dishes as well. So I find that with seafood and with spicy food as well, especially if you have a nice spicy paella, it actually, that spicy notes brings out that sweetness of the fruit, and it actually balances the meal so nicely. So for me, that's actually a favorite to pair in our house.
Thank you for the inspiration. Cheers.
Cheers.
Fantastic Syrah. While we study the Syrah, I think my benchmark here is Southern Road. Easy drinking lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because Northern will be about bold, big. But this is just color. We're just talking about the hue here, and and in my nose, the pepper is not necessarily black pepper. It could be peppercorns, but it's more leaning towards white pepper than black. But plums are still there. Elements of dark fruit are still there. A little bit part of a backdrop of the wine, not necessarily all about fruit. But the spice, which is, I think, the most important thing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to blind taste Syrah. Spice carries right through to the palate. Honest, that's what I call it. When something, if you nose it, it must taste almost similar to the nose. So
yeah.
it's very honest. side of the palate. So nice integrated tannins, elegant, actually silky and elegant. But because it lingers at the front of the palate, it also says, where's the food?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Now, you know, the beauty of a cool climate Syrah, and why I chose to work with Syrah from Hermanus, is that you actually have such a long ripening period. You know, that's when all the flavors develop in your grapes. And what sometimes happens is that you get all the flavors, but at a higher alcohol. And what a cool climate Syrah does, is actually giving you all that flavor, that punch, and that power, and the fruits and the spices, like you said, at a lower alcohol. And when you talk about it lingers on the front of your palate, I feel, you know, it's acidity. It excites me because it's actually something that I feel gives the wine ageability. It's something that when you buy this bottle of wine, you can easily enjoy it now, and that's how I prefer to make my wines, you know, is that when you do invest in buying a bottle of Lelie Van Saron at the moment, you know you can open it up and you can have it around the table with your friends and family. But if you do choose to keep it in your cellar in the house for the next 5 to 10 years and open it up again, you will have a nice experience again, you know, that acidity is just going to carry the wine over time.
Yes.
And that's what I love about cool climate Syrah.
Right, before we conclude, label.
Yes.
Followed by the fortune cookie message.
Okay. I actually think this is one discussion. So
Yes.
my fortune cookie says, be true to yourself. And when I tell you the story about the inspiration about my label, it's very much that. You know, I started making the wine in 2017, and the wine was maturing in barrel over time, and I bottled the wine. And in early 2019, late 2018, I had to come up with a concept about what am I going to call this wine, how am I going to sell the wine. And I had many, many ideas, and I went back and forth. And someone gave me this very good advice. And they said, well, wine sells with the story. And what is your story that you want to tell? And I'm going to go back to my fortune cookie. Be true to yourself. That was the advice. You know, so for me, it was the only story that I can tell is my own story. And for me, it's so important to know where you're coming from, to know where you are going. And as an individual coming into the wine industry that didn't have background in wine, it was very much important for me to know exactly where I want to put myself and what I want to showcase with my wines and my story. So my label is very much inspired by home and where I come from. So Lelie Van Saron, like I said, refers to Lily of Saron, like lily of the valley. So Saron is a small town in the Boerland where I come from and where I was raised, herding cattle. And then, and then I was thinking about my family and how they've influenced me and helped me where I am today. And the design work is actually inspired by my mother's crochet work. So my great-grandmother taught my mother the insane skill of crochet work. You know, my mother tried to teach me this, but it's just so quick, I can't catch it. But I feel like it's so symbolic actually, because it's an artwork, very much similar to winemaking. And every stitch that she does, and every step that I make with wine is a calculated step, you know. It's there for a purpose. She ended up making these sets in primary school and selling them for R1 a set to her teachers. And I like telling this story because it just tells you the kind of person that she is and with the principles that I was raised, you know. So very much strong-willed, forward-thinking, and we all want to be entrepreneurs one day. But yeah, so then the label is inspired by my mother's crochet piece. We have the lilies in there as well.
Right.
And then the flower in the middle is called the hibiscus flower, which is also the Roos van Saron. So a lot of the the old ladies in our town, if they would talk about and talk with pride about someone coming from our town, they will call you the Roos van Saron, the
Nice.
Lily of Saron, the Lelie Van Saron. So that's the inspiration behind my artwork.
You truly are true to yourself. Cheers
True
to you.
to yourself.
Well done.
Thank you,
Congratulations.
Brian.